Red Dead Redemption is easily one of the most well-received games of all time, and even though a lot of people consider the sequel to be better, many still hold fond memories of John Marston's adventure. With Rockstar shifting its focus to GTA 6, however, the chances of a remake are pretty much non-existent. Are they leaving money on the table though? Well, why don't we dive straight into it and find out. First up, Rockstar is too ambitious for its own good. Over the past year or so, we've seen Rockstar transition over from this prolific team that churns out a masterpiece every few years to a company that can even skip generations for their franchises. Like, their development time has gotten so long that it's almost impossible now to get a Red Dead and Grand Theft Auto game within the same console cycle. And we don't want to make you feel old, but GTA 5 came out almost a decade ago on the Xbox 360 and PS3, which is insane considering we're not getting the next game for a few years at least. So technically, we never got a Grand Theft Auto game during the PS4 generation. Now, obviously, Rockstar's games aren't exactly small, as the immersion levels of their vast open worlds are second to none. Also, the fact that GTA 5 continues to sell like hotcakes 9 years after its release is a testament to how well their games continue to age. With that said though, it's a bit of a shame that fans have to wait for so long for new installments, as someone who only plays single player probably won't get the same level of enjoyment out of their games. For instance, if you've played Red Dead Redemption 2 and finished it, then you've got no reason to go back since it's not exactly an RPG with multiple narrative threads. However, it's an inherent problem with the ambition and scope of their games, as hiring more devs or expanding their studios won't really solve much. Besides, the level of craftsmanship and attention to detail that goes into these games isn't really something that any other studio can just replicate. So why doesn't Rockstar make remakes to pad things out? Now, usually when game studios have got their hands full with bigger and more ambitious projects, they form a small team that remakes one of their older games for the time being, and this is done for a couple of reasons. For starters, they can't continue to pay hundreds of employees without releasing anything for 5 or 6 years. On top of that, most video game fans also start to clamor for new stuff after a few years. So you kinda hit two birds with one stone by making some cash and pleasing the community at the same time. As far as Rockstar is concerned though, they've already got a pretty good revenue stream with GTA Online. Also, they did dip their toes into the remaster territory with the Grand Theft Auto trilogy, which obviously didn't go as well as they'd hoped. Having said that, many would say that Red Dead Redemption is a game that's ripe for a remake, as not only is it newer than the GTA trilogy, but it's also pretty similar to its successor in terms of its mechanics and style. Like, of course, you don't have the insanely immersive things of Red Dead Redemption 2 like shrinking balls on horses, but tonally, they're very close. Now, do people even want a Red Dead Redemption remake? Red Dead Redemption's a weird game in that it hasn't aged that badly despite coming out over a decade ago. We mean, yes, it doesn't have nearly as much depth as its sequel, but honestly, even if you go back to it today, you're in for a good time. With that said, since it's technically a 360 game, it hasn't gotten a similar level of support as some of the PS4 era games. For instance, even GTA 5 has had multiple versions since its initial release, with the latest one taking full advantage of the next-gen hardware. Also, even if it was a PS4 or Xbox One game, we could have seen an FPS boost treatment. As things stand now, however, the original Red Dead Redemption continues to live in an untapped territory, where it could easily be remade for new hardware. Oh, and as far as fans are concerned, you can bet that it's gonna sell like hotcakes. Like, the name alone is enough to sell a few million copies. On top of that, we're seeing a pretty massive resurgence in remakes these days around the gaming industry. For instance, we've got Dead Space and The Last of Us remakes coming out within the next 12 months. Plus, even Rockstar's tried to have a go at the trend already with the GTA 3 games. However, does Rockstar want to remake Red Dead Redemption? Now obviously, most people would gobble up any game that Rockstar churns out, and Red Dead Redemption's probably sitting on the top of that most wanted list next to the likes of Bully and Manhunt. However, it'd be naive to expect Take-Two to fulfill our wishes, because after all, they don't really operate on market trends. Like, they're just too big at this point to look at fan demand and just do their own thing instead. Also, their failed experiment with GTA Trilogy means that they're probably not going to touch another old franchise again for a while. Of course, it sucks to hear as a fan, as Red Dead Redemption's such a masterpiece that needs to be more accessible for newer audiences. But at the same time, you don't want to tarnish your brand reputation any further. further. Don't get us wrong, people still love Rockstar to bits. It's just that it's been a while since Red Dead Redemption 2, and the only thing we've gotten since then are the GTA remasters. So confidence levels aren't exactly high when it comes to their games. Also, it's not like they've totally detached themselves from the possibility of making a remake. For context, they've already tasked Remedy with remakes for Max Payne, which is a start. With that said, what does a Red Dead remake even look like? Okay, so if you don't know, Red Dead Redemption 2 is actually a prequel to the original game, which, we know, sounds weird. But it's the story of John Marston, who's also a pretty prominent character in 2. And honestly, if you liked Arthur Morgan's story, then there's no way that you won't like the OG game. The only thing holding it back right now is the fact that it's got some dated mechanics and is lacking in depth. So obviously, it's going to be a jarring experience for anyone who hops in after Red Dead 2. What could Rockstar do though to freshen things up for a newer audience? Like, it's easy to suggest that they should just do the entire thing within the framework of the second game. Sadly, it's not as simple as that. We mean, a Red Dead remake's never going to be as big or as ambitious as one of Rockstar's mainline games. And you'd be setting yourself up for disappointment by expecting something like that. However, they could still bring incremental upgrades to both the mechanics and visuals that make it feel more modern. Oh, and it's not a far-fetched wish either, as we've seen BioWare give a similar treatment to the first Mass Effect game. After all, that game's even older than Red Dead Redemption. Like, no one's asking for 15 different types of horse fur. Literally, all they need to do is update the textures, rework some mechanics, and we're golden. But of course, it's easier said than done. So, is Rockstar leaving money on the table by ignoring Red Dead? Let's answer the million-dollar question now. Does Rockstar need to make a Red Dead Redemption remake? Well, for starters, they simply don't have the extra resources to do justice to a project of that size. Like, as of right now, the entirety of Rockstar's deep into GTA 6 development. On top of that, their recent misadventure with GTA Trilogy means that they're probably iffy about tackling such a thing anyway. However, probably the biggest reason behind them not giving in to fan demands is the fact that they just don't need to. You see, Rockstar's already making boatloads of cash with GTA Online. Plus, their even older games continue to sell like there's no tomorrow. On top of that, if you've sold 160 million copies of anything, then you're already set for life as far as money's concerned. So, even though it may seem like Rockstar's being naive by not capitalizing on recent trends, the reality is they're just too big to look at that sort of stuff. We mean, the biggest driving factor of any remake is to generate some quick revenue, which Take-Two clearly doesn't need. If you're a fan and are crossing your fingers for a Red Dead Redemption remake though, all hope is not fully lost yet, as that's probably the immediate thing on their agenda after Grand Theft Auto 6. What do you think? Is Rockstar losing any ground by not releasing a Red Dead remake? Or do they just need to focus on GTA 6 and get that out of the window first? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.